The lights flickered again in the main control room of mining station. Alpha 7, Chief Engineer Korvac, pressed his four-fingered hand against the warm metal console and felt the vibrations getting worse. The big fusion reactor that powered their home was dying, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. "How much time do we have?" asked Station Commander Yella. She was a tall, blue-skinned woman from the Centauri system. Her voice stayed calm, but Korvac could see the worry in her large, golden eyes. "Maybe 6 hours before total power failure," he said. "The cooling system is already shutting down. After that, we lose life support for all 50,000 people on this rock. Kepler-442b was not a pretty place. It was a small rocky planet covered in mining tunnels and metal buildings. The air was thin and cold. Without the station's power, everyone would freeze to death in less than a day. They had sent mining ships out to the asteroid belt, but those ships would not be back for weeks. "Send the distress signal," Commander Yella ordered. "Full emergency broadcast on all Galactic Confederation channels." The communications officer, a young human named Marcus Webb, was one of only 12 humans living on the station. Most humans had left this part of space long ago. His fingers moved quickly over the quantum transmitter controls. "Broadcasting." "Now, Commander," Marcus said, "standard emergency protocol. Should reach the nearest Confederation patrol ship in about 4 hours." "Good," Yella said. "Korvac, can you keep the reactor stable until help arrives?" "I will try," the engineer replied. But they all knew it would be close. The distress signal flew out into the darkness of space, carried by quantum waves that moved faster than light itself. It was a simple message that had been used thousands of times across the galaxy. "This is Mining Station Alpha 7 on Kepler-442b. We have reactor failure and need immediate assistance. 50,000 lives at risk. Please respond." In the hours that followed, the crew worked desperately to keep their dying station alive. They shut down non-essential systems. They moved people from the outer sections to the warmer inner areas. They did everything they could think of, but the reactor kept getting worse. Marcus stayed at his communication station, listening for any reply. The quantum channels were mostly quiet, just the usual chatter from cargo ships and patrol vessels. Far away, nothing close enough to help them. Then something impossible happened. "Commander!" Marcus called out, his voice shaking. "I'm getting a response signal." "Already?" Yella rushed to his station. "From where?" Marcus stared at his instruments with wide eyes. "That's the problem, Commander. The signal is coming from the dead zone." Everyone in the control room went quiet. The dead zone was what people called the region of space beyond the outer rim. It was where the old star maps ended. No ships went there anymore. No signals ever came from there. It had been silent for 200 years. "That cannot be right," said Korvac. "Check your equipment." Marcus ran the scans again. "No, sir, the instruments are working fine. The signal is definitely coming from coordinates in the dead zone. And it's strong, very strong." "What does it say?" Commander Yella asked. Marcus pressed a button, and a voice filled the control room. It was speaking in Standard Galactic, but the accent was strange, old-fashioned. The voice was calm and clear. "Message received. Help is coming." That was all. Just 5 words. But those words made everyone feel both relief and fear at the same time. "Who could be out there?" whispered Dr. Sarah Kim, the station's chief medical officer. She was another human, middle-aged with graying hair. "Nothing has come from the dead zone in centuries." Commander Yella had studied galactic history. In the academy, she knew the stories. 200 years ago, there had been a great war. The enemy had been something terrible from beyond known space. The humans had volunteered to go fight them in the dark regions where no other species dared to travel. Entire human fleets had jumped into the unknown and never returned. Most people thought the humans had all died out there. Their colonies had been empty when the rescue ships finally arrived. Their home systems had been abandoned. It was like an entire species had just vanished overnight. "Maybe some humans survived," Marcus said quietly. "Maybe they built something out there in the dark. Or maybe something else is using their old communication codes. Korvac said. His voice was grim. Something that learned how to talk like them. The hours crawled by. The reactor got worse. The lights dimmed. The air got colder. People gathered in the main halls, sharing blankets and telling stories to keep their children calm. Everyone tried not to think about what would happen if help did not come, but Marcus never left his station. He kept scanning the quantum channels, searching for any sign of their mysterious rescuer. The other communication posts across the galaxy would have heard that signal too. On every civilized world, people would be asking the same questions. Who was in the dead zone? What had they been doing out there for 200 years? And why were they answering now? As the 6th hour approached, long-range sensors started picking up something new. At first, it looked like a small asteroid moving very fast toward their system, but as it got closer, the sensors showed something that made no sense. "Commander," called out Navigation Officer 10, a green-skinned Rigelian with 3 eyes. "You need to see this." The main screen showed a 3-dimensional map of their solar system. A red dot was moving toward them at incredible speed. Next to the dot were numbers that kept climbing higher and higher. "What am I looking at?" Yella asked. "Whatever is coming toward us is moving at 0.75 light speed," 10 said. "That's impossible. No known ship can travel that fast in normal space. How big is it?" Korvac asked. 10 checked his readings twice before answering. "According to sensors, it's approximately 3,000 kilometers in diameter." The control room fell silent again. 3,000 kilometers was bigger than most space stations. It was bigger than some moons. "That has to be an error," Dr. Kim said. "Nothing that large could move that fast." But the sensors did not lie. Something enormous was racing toward them through space, moving faster than anything in the known galaxy. And it was coming from the dead zone, where nothing was supposed to exist anymore. "Time to arrival?" Commander Yella asked. "At current speed, approximately 14 hours. 10 replied. 14 hours. They would run out of power in less than 6. But whatever was coming would arrive long before their backup systems failed completely. The question was whether that would be good news or very, very bad news. Marcus adjusted his headset and tried to send another message toward the approaching object. "Unknown vessel, this is Mining Station Alpha 7. Please identify yourself and state your intentions." For several minutes, there was no reply. Then the quantum transmitter crackled to life again. The same calm voice spoke, but this time the words sent chills through everyone who heard them. "This is the UEF Prometheus. We received your distress call. Prepare for humanitarian aid deployment. UEF, United Earth Federation." That was what the humans had called their government before they disappeared into the dark, before they had vanished from galactic civilization forever, but now, it seemed, they were coming home. The news spread across the galaxy faster than quantum light itself. Within hours of the transmission from the dead zone, every major government knew about it. Emergency meetings were called on 100 different worlds. Ancient files were pulled from storage vaults that had not been opened in decades on the capital world of the Galactic Confederation. Fleet Admiral Zorth paced back and forth in the war room. His 6 legs clicked against the metal floor as he studied the reports coming in from long-range sensor stations. The other military leaders sat around a circular table, their faces showing the same mix of fear and confusion. "Tell me again what?" "We know," Admiral Zorth said to his intelligence chief. Commander Nash was a thin woman from the Alpha Centauri colonies. She had spent her entire career studying threats to galactic security, but nothing had prepared her for this. 3 days ago, Mining Station Alpha 7 sent a standard distress call, she began. 12 minutes later, they received a response from the dead zone. The signal was traced to coordinates that have been empty for 200 years. "Empty according to our records," interrupted General Vex, a large reptilian being from the Draco system, "but clearly something has been living out there. The approaching object is now confirmed to be artificial," Nash continued. "Our best senses show it is roughly spherical, approximately 3,000 kilometers in diameter. It appears to be made of some kind of dark metal that our instruments cannot identify. How fast is it moving? Asked Admiral Zorth. 0.78. Light speed and accelerating. At this rate, it will reach the Kepler system in less than 10 hours. The room fell quiet. Even the most advanced Confederation ships could only reach 0.4 light speed, and only for short distances. Whatever was approaching the mining station was using technology that was far beyond anything they understood. What about weapons? General Vex asked. Can we determine if this thing is armed? Nash looked uncomfortable. That's where things get difficult, sir. The object's surface is covered in structures that could be weapons, but they don't match any known designs. Some of them are several kilometers long. If they are weapons, they would be capable of destroying entire fleets. Admiral Zorth stopped pacing. Send word to all sector commands. I want every available ship moved to safe distance from the Kepler system. If this goes badly, we need to be ready to protect the core worlds. But even as he gave the order, Zorth knew it would not matter. If something that large and that fast wanted to cause trouble, there was very little the Confederation could do to stop it. Back on mining station Alpha 7, the situation was getting worse by the hour. The reactor was failing faster than Chief Engineer Korvac had predicted. The main power grid flickered on and off. People huddled together in the warmer sections of the station, trying to stay calm while their world slowly froze around them. Commander Yella stood in the observation deck, looking out at the stars through the thick glass windows. In the distance, she could see a tiny point of light that was growing brighter. That was their mysterious rescuer, still hours away, but moving closer at impossible speed. Commander, Marcus called from his communication station. I'm picking up more signals. Long-range transmissions from Confederation ships. What are they saying? Yella asked. Marcus listened for a moment, then his face went pale. They're telling all civilian ships to evacuate the system. Military vessels are pulling back to minimum safe distance. They think we might be in danger. Dr. Kim joined them at the observation window. Danger from our rescuers? Think about it, Yella said quietly. Something has been hiding in the dead zone for 200 years, building ships the size of moons, using technology we cannot understand. Why would they stay hidden for so long, and why come out now? The questions had no good answers. All they could do was wait and hope that whatever was coming would actually help them instead of making things worse. As the hours passed, the approaching object became visible to the naked eye. It started as just another star, but soon it was clearly different. It was perfectly round and completely black except for tiny lights scattered across its surface. Those lights formed patterns that hurt to look at, like mathematical equations written in pure energy. It's beautiful, whispered one of the station's children, a young Altarian girl with silver skin. She pressed her face against the observation window, watching the dark sphere grow larger and larger. Her mother pulled her back. Don't stare at it too long, sweetie. We don't know what it might do to your eyes. The woman was wise to be careful. Across the galaxy, astronomers who had been studying the object through powerful telescopes were reporting strange effects. Some said the patterns on its surface seemed to move when nobody was looking directly at them. Others claimed they could hear whispers in languages that did not exist, but the strangest reports came from the few remaining human colonies in the outer systems. Humans who looked at images of the approaching sphere said they felt something they could not explain. A sense of recognition, a feeling that they were looking at something that had once been home. It's one of ours, an old human veteran had said on the Rigel 7 colony. He had tears in his eyes as he studied the pictures. I don't know how. I know, but I know. They didn't all die out there. Some of them made it, and they built something incredible. The veteran was right. Though he could not have imagined just how incredible it really was, on mining station Alpha 7, the power finally failed completely just as the dark sphere entered their solar system. The lights went out. The air recyclers stopped working. The artificial gravity shut down, leaving everyone floating in the cold darkness. But then something amazing happened. The sphere, which had been moving at incredible speed for days, began to slow down. Not gradually like a normal ship would do, but instantly. One moment it was racing through space fast enough to cross star systems in hours. The next moment, it was drifting slowly toward their small planet like a soap bubble floating on a gentle breeze. "That should be impossible," Korvac said, floating near the observation window with his emergency light. The energy required to stop something that massive that quickly would tear it apart. But the sphere was not torn apart. It simply hung in space above their world, blotting out the stars. Up close, they could see that its surface was not smooth. It was covered in cities. Millions of lights marked streets and buildings and spaces where people might live. The entire thing was not just a ship. It was a world. A moon that someone had hollowed out and turned into a home for billions of beings. Then it spoke to them again. The same calm voice, but this time it came from speakers all around the station. The sphere was broadcasting on every possible frequency, making sure that everyone could hear. "This is Admiral Sarachan of the United Earth Federation vessel Prometheus. We apologize for the delay. We had to make sure our arrival would not cause gravitational disruption to your planet. Please prepare for immediate assistance. Our engineering teams will board your station in 30 minutes. Admiral Sarachan, a human name." After 200 years of silence, the humans were not just alive but apparently thriving. And they had come back home at last. But as the people on mining station Alpha 7 would soon discover, the humans who returned were not quite the same species that had left so long ago. Their time in the dark between the stars had changed them in ways that would terrify and amaze the entire galaxy. The first thing Commander Yella noticed was the sound. When the human transport ship docked with their station, it made no noise at all, no hissing of airlocks, no mechanical grinding of metal against metal. The ship simply appeared to flow through the station's outer wall like water moving through a screen. "How did they do that?" whispered Dr. Kim, floating beside her in the zero gravity of the darkened docking bay. Before Yella could answer, the wall began to glow with soft blue light. The metal seemed to bend and stretch, creating an opening that had not been there moments before. Through this impossible doorway, figures began to emerge. They were human, but not quite like any humans the station crew had ever seen. They were tall, at least 2.5 meters each, with broad shoulders and long limbs. Their skin had a slight metallic shine to it, as if tiny silver threads ran just beneath the surface. Their eyes glowed with a faint inner light that was both beautiful and unsettling. The humans wore armor that seemed to be made of living shadow. It moved and shifted as they walked, adapting to their movements in ways that solid metal should not be able to do. Strange symbols flickered across the dark surface, appearing and disappearing like thoughts trying to become real, but the most shocking thing was how they moved. Despite the station's lack of artificial gravity, the humans walked across the floor as if they were on solid ground. Their boots seemed to stick to any surface they chose, defying the basic laws of physics that governed everything else in the universe. The leader of the group stepped forward and removed her helmet. Underneath was the face of a middle-aged woman, with short gray hair and kind eyes. She looked almost normal, except for the thin lines of silver that traced patterns across her cheeks and forehead. "I am Admiral Sarah Chun," she said, and her voice was warm and reassuring. "We are here to help. Please do not be afraid." Commander Yella tried to speak, but found her voice caught in her throat. After a moment, she managed to say, "We thought you were all dead, the humans, I mean. We thought you died in the war." Admiral Chun smiled sadly. "Many of us did die. But some of us learned to live in ways we never imagined possible. May I see your reactor room? We can have your power restored in a few hours." Chief Engineer Korvac floated forward, still clutching his emergency light. "The fusion core is completely burned out. It would take weeks to repair, even if we had the right parts." "We brought our own parts," Chun said simply. She gestured to her team, and they began moving through the station with impossible grace. They seemed to know exactly where they were going, even though none of them had ever been on mining station Alpha 7 before. They flowed through corridors and around corners like they were following a map that only they could see. Korvac led them to the reactor room, where the massive fusion core sat cold and dark. The human engineers studied it for only a few minutes before beginning their work. What they did next made no sense to anyone watching. Instead of using tools, the humans placed their bare hands on the broken machinery. Their skin began to glow brighter, and the silver lines on their faces pulsed with energy. Where they touched the reactor, the metal began to change. Cracks sealed themselves. Burned-out components rebuilt themselves from the inside out. Parts that had been missing for years simply grew back into existence. "This is impossible," Korvac whispered. "Matter cannot be created from nothing." One of the human engineers looked up at him and smiled. "You are right. We are not creating matter. We are convincing it to remember what it used to be." Within 2 hours, the fusion reactor was not just repaired but improved. It hummed with more power than it had ever produced before. The lights came back on throughout the station. The air recyclers started working again. The artificial gravity returned, gently pulling everyone back down to the floor. But the most amazing change was in the walls themselves. The metal had become stronger and cleaner. The air smelled fresher. Even the food in the cafeteria tasted better than it had in years. It was as if the entire station had been healed, not just fixed. Admiral Chun found Commander Yella in the main control room, where the crew was staring at displays showing impossible energy readings. "How?" Yella asked. "How did you do all this?" Chun sat down across from her, moving with fluid grace. 200 years ago, we went into the dark spaces between galaxies to fight something terrible. We thought we would be gone for a few years at most. We were wrong. What did you find out there? "Is things that should not exist," Chun said quietly. "Beings that live in the spaces where reality becomes thin. Creatures that eat light and time and hope. We fought them for decades, losing ship after ship, until we realized that conventional weapons and normal thinking would never be enough." Dr. Kim joined them, her medical scanner beeping as she tried to take readings of the Admiral. "What happened?" "To you? Your cellular structure is unlike anything I have ever seen." Chun looked down at her hands, where the silver lines pulsed gently. "We learned to become more than human. Not through technology exactly, but through understanding. We discovered that reality is not as solid as most people believe. Matter and energy and consciousness are all part of the same thing. When you truly understand that, you can convince the universe to work with you instead of against you. Are you still human?" Marcus asked from his communication station. Chun considered the question for a long moment. "We are what humanity becomes when it stops accepting limits. We are what you could be if you chose to learn." Outside the station, the moon-sized ship called Prometheus continued to orbit peacefully. But across the galaxy, military forces were gathering. The Galactic Confederation had called an emergency session. Every major species had sent their fastest ships toward the Kepler system. Fleet Admiral Zorth was among them, commanding a battle group of 300 vessels. They maintained what they thought was a safe distance, but they were ready to act if the mysterious humans proved to be a threat. "Open a channel to the human ship," Zorth ordered. The transmission was answered immediately by Admiral Chun herself. Her face appeared on the main screen of his flagship, calm and patient. "I am Fleet Admiral Zorth of the Galactic Confederation," he began. "I demand to know your intentions in this system." "We came to help people who needed help," Chun replied. "Simply. The same reason anyone should respond to a distress call. Where have you been for 200 years? What happened to your colonies, your homeworlds?" Chun's expression grew more serious. "We evacuated them to keep them safe. The war we fought was not something that should come near populated worlds. We took our people with us to the dark places, and we taught them to survive in ways that most species cannot imagine." "Prove it," General Vex interrupted from another ship. "If you are truly here to help, submit to inspection. Allow our scientists to study your technology." Admiral Chun was quiet for several seconds. When she spoke again, her voice was still kind, but there was something else underneath it. Something that made experienced military officers feel suddenly afraid. You want proof of what we have become? She asked. Very well. But understand that some knowledge cannot be unknown once it is learned. Some truths change you just by seeing them. She turned to someone off-screen and gave a short nod. What happened next would be talked about for generations, across every civilized world in the galaxy. Admiral Cheon stood on the bridge of the Prometheus and looked out at the Confederation fleet surrounding them. 300 ships, all armed and ready for battle. Their commanders thought they were being brave by demanding answers from humanity. They had no idea what they were about to see. Begin the demonstration, Cheon said quietly to her bridge crew. On every ship in the Confederation fleet, warning alarms began to sound. Sensor operators stared at their screens in confusion as impossible readings flooded their instruments. Something was happening to the space around the human moonship, but their equipment could not explain what it was. Admiral Zorth, his science officer, called out from her station. I'm detecting massive energy buildups around the human vessel, but the energy signatures don't match anything in our databases. What kind of energy? Zorth demanded. That's just it, sir. It's not electromagnetic, not nuclear, not gravitational. It's something else entirely, something that shouldn't exist. On the Prometheus, Admiral Chun placed her hand on a smooth black panel that covered most of one wall. The silver lines in her skin began to glow brighter as she connected her consciousness to the ship's systems. Around her, the other human officers did the same, their minds joining together in a way that would have been impossible for any other species. Show them the barrier first, Chun said. Let them understand what we have been protecting them from. The space directly in front of the Prometheus began to shimmer like heat waves rising from hot pavement. Then the shimmer grew stronger, and suddenly there was a crack in reality itself. It started small, just a thin line of absolute darkness that seemed to cut through the fabric of space-time, but the crack grew wider. And through it something looked back. On Admiral Zorth's flagship, the crew watched in horror as things that should not exist became visible through the tear in space. Shapes that hurt to look at directly. Geometries that made no sense. Colors that had no names because they had never existed in normal reality. What is that? Whispered General Vex, his reptilian features pale with fear. That, Admiral Chun's voice came over the communication channel, is what lives in the space between galaxies? What we have been fighting for 200 years. What we have been keeping away from you. Through the crack, tentacles made of living shadow began to emerge. They were each the size of battleships, covered in eyes that burned with cold fire. Where they touched normal space, reality began to break down. Stars flickered and went out. The basic laws of physics stopped working properly, but before the creatures could fully emerge, the humans acted. From the surface of the Prometheus, beams of impossible light shot out toward the crack. But these were not laser weapons or particle beams. They were streams of pure mathematics, equations made real and sent flying through space at the speed of thought. When the mathematical weapons hit the shadow creatures, something amazing happened. The monsters did not explode or burn. Instead, they simply stopped being. Not destroyed, but edited out of existence like words being erased from a page. Impossible, breathed the science officer on Zorth's ship. You cannot simply delete matter from reality. You can, Admiral Chun replied calmly, if you understand that reality is just information, and information can be rewritten. The crack in space began to close, but not before more creatures tried to push through. These were even more terrible than the first ones. They looked like twisted versions of familiar things. Stars that screamed, planets that bled, moons that had too many faces. Each one was large enough to swallow entire solar systems, but the humans were ready for them. The Prometheus itself began to change shape, its spherical form flowing like liquid metal. Structures emerged from its surface that defied description. They were part machine, part living tissue, part pure concept given form. When these impossible weapons fired, they did not just destroy the invading creatures. They reached backward through time and prevented them from ever having existed in the first place. This is what we learned to do, Chun explained as her people fought beings that existed beyond nightmares. We learned to think in ways that reality itself respects. We became more than just another species living in the universe. We became partners with the universe itself. The battle lasted only minutes, but it felt like hours to everyone watching. When it was over, the crack in space had been sealed, and the shadow creatures were gone as if they had never been. But the demonstration was not finished. Now, Admiral Chun said, let me show you what we built while we were away. She gave another signal to her crew, and the space around the Prometheus began to change again. But this time, instead of cracks appearing, new things began to emerge from what looked like empty space. Ships, thousands and thousands of ships. Each one was the size of a small city, sleek and dark like the Prometheus but shaped differently. Some looked like giant insects made of metal and light. Others resembled sea creatures that had learned to swim through space instead of water. A few were so strange that the watching aliens could not find words to describe them at all. How many ships do you have? General Vex asked, his voice barely a whisper. We stopped counting at 10 million, Chun replied. But that was several decades ago. We have been busy. Admiral Zorth felt his 6 legs go weak beneath him. 10 million ships, each one apparently capable of rewriting the laws of physics. Even if the entire Confederation fleet worked together, they would not be able to defeat even a small fraction of such a force, but the humans were not done with their demonstration. One of the city-sized ships moved closer to a nearby asteroid that was about 50 kilometers wide. The ship extended something that looked like a metal flower. Its petals opening to reveal a core of swirling energy. The asteroid did not explode. When the energy touched it, instead it transformed. The rock became metal, then crystal, then something that was neither rock, nor metal, nor crystal, but somehow all three at once. In minutes, the floating mountain had become a beautiful structure, covered in lights and gardens, ready to house millions of beings in comfort and safety. We build worlds now, Admiral Chun explained. We take dead rocks and convince them to become homes. We find systems where life struggles to survive, and we teach them how to thrive. This is what humanity has become? Not conquerors, but gardeners. On a cosmic scale, the Confederation officers stared at their screens in stunned silence. What they were seeing challenged everything they understood about technology, about physics, about what was possible in the universe. Why? Admiral Zorth finally asked. Why did you develop such incredible power? Why did you stay away for so long? Chun's expression grew sad. Because the things we fought in the dark spaces were not the only threat to galactic civilization. They were just the beginning. There are worse things coming. Things that make the shadow creatures look like harmless pets. We stayed away because we needed time to become strong enough to protect everyone when those worse things arrive. When will they come? Dr. Kim asked from Mining Station Alpha 7, where she had been listening to the entire conversation. Soon. Chun replied, very soon. That is why we have returned. The galaxy needs gardeners now. It needs protectors who can stand against the darkness that comes from beyond the edge of everything. She looked directly at Admiral Zorth through the communication screen. The question is, will you accept our protection? Or will you try to fight us and leave yourselves defenseless when the real enemies arrive? The silence that followed her question would determine the future of every living being in the galaxy. The silence stretched for what felt like forever. Admiral Zorth looked around at the other commanders on his bridge, seeing his own fear and uncertainty reflected in their faces. Behind them on the main screen, Admiral Chun waited patiently, her glowing eyes showing neither threat nor anger, only a deep sadness that came from knowing terrible truths. Finally, Zorth spoke. If we accept your protection, what does that mean for our independence? Our freedom to govern ourselves? It means you stay alive, Chun replied simply. Beyond that, you can live however you choose. We are not interested in ruling anyone. We have seen what happens to civilizations that spend their time fighting each other instead of preparing for real dangers. General Vex leaned forward at his station. And if we refuse? Chun's expression did not change, but the lights on the Prometheus seemed to dim slightly. Then you face what is coming alone, and you will not survive it. On Mining Station Alpha 7, Commander Yella watched the conversation with growing understanding. She had seen what the humans could do. She had felt the change in her station when they healed it. These beings were not bluffing or making empty threats. They were stating facts as simply as someone might mention the weather. Admiral Chun, Yella said, breaking into the communication. You mentioned that worse things are coming. Can you tell us what they are? Chun turned her attention to the station commander. Imagine the shadow creatures you saw, but organized, intelligent, led by beings that exist in so many dimensions at once that looking at them drives entire species insane. They consume not just matter and energy, but meaning itself. They eat the concepts that hold reality together. She paused, letting that sink in before continuing. They have been moving toward this galaxy for thousands of years, devouring everything in their path. Not destroying it, but making it never have existed at all. Entire civilizations simply forgotten, erased from history so completely that no one remembers they were ever there. Dr. Kim felt her blood turn cold. How do you know they are coming here? Because we have been fighting their advanced scouts for 2 centuries, Chun said. The shadow creatures were just the weakest of their servants, sent ahead to weaken the barriers between dimensions. The real army is still decades away, but their influence grows stronger every year. Admiral Zorth studied the readings from his sensors, trying to understand what he was seeing. The human fleet around the Prometheus was vast beyond imagination, but even 10 million ships seemed small when compared to the threat Chun was describing. How can you possibly fight something like that? He asked. By not fighting them the way you would expect, Chun replied. By becoming something they cannot erase, cannot forget, cannot make to have never existed. We learn to write ourselves into the basic structure of reality itself. We became a permanent part of the universe's memory. She gestured to the space around them, and suddenly the watching aliens could see things that had been invisible before. Lines of force connected every star, every planet, every living being in a vast web of meaning and purpose. And flowing through, those lines were patterns that looked almost like human thoughts, but more complex and more beautiful than any individual mind could create. We are everywhere now, Chun explained. Every photon of light, every grain of space dust, every quantum particle carries a piece of human consciousness. We are woven into the fabric of existence so deeply that to remove us would require destroying the entire universe and starting over. The implications of what she was saying slowly became clear to the watching commanders. Humanity had not just evolved beyond normal physical limits. They had transcended the boundaries between individual and cosmos, becoming something that was both deeply human and completely universal at the same time. That is how we will protect you, Chun continued. By extending that same protection to every species that accepts it. By making your civilizations part of the permanent structure of reality. By ensuring that no matter what comes from the dark spaces beyond, you will continue to exist. Commander Yella felt tears on her cheeks. What do we have to do? Simply agree, Chun said. Accept that humanity will watch over your worlds and your people. We will not interfere with your daily lives, your governments, your cultures. But we will be there when the darkness comes. And we will remember you when everything else tries to make you forgotten. The choice was not really a choice at all. Admiral Zorth knew it, and so did every other commander in the fleet. They could accept humanity's protection and survive, or they could refuse and face extinction. But knowing that did not make the decision easier. This is Fleet Admiral Zorth of the Galactic Confederation, he said formally. On behalf of all member species, I accept humanity's offer of protection. The response was immediate. Throughout the fleet, every ship's instruments registered the same impossible change. The space around them was becoming more solid, more real, more permanent. It was as if the universe itself was taking note of their existence and writing it down in a book that could never be lost or destroyed. On Mining Station Alpha 7, the effect was even more dramatic. The walls began to glow with soft inner light. The air became sweeter and easier to breathe. The artificial gravity felt more natural, more comfortable. Everyone on the station felt stronger, healthier, more alive than they had ever felt before. "Welcome to the Sanctuary Protocols," Admiral Chun said, and for the first time since her arrival, she smiled. "You are now under humanity's protection. Your species, your cultures, your individual lives are all guaranteed to continue existing no matter what tries to destroy them." But even as the aliens celebrated their newfound safety, Chun's expression grew serious again. "However, understand that this protection comes with responsibility. You are now part of something larger than yourselves. When other species call for help, you must be ready to answer. When the darkness finally arrives, you must be prepared to stand with us." General Vex nodded slowly. "What do you need us to do?" "Learn," Chun replied. "Grow, become more than you were. The enemies we face cannot be defeated by ships and weapons alone. They must be defeated by ideas, by consciousness, by the simple refusal to give up hope even when everything seems lost." She turned to address all the ships at once. "We will begin construction of sanctuary stations around every inhabited world in the galaxy. These will serve as refuges when the final battle comes, and as schools where your people can learn to think in ways that reality respects." Over the following days, the human fleet spread throughout the star system and then beyond. True to Chun's word, massive construction began around every populated planet. The sanctuary stations were marvels of impossible architecture, part fortress, part university, part temple to the power of conscious will. On mining station Alpha 7, life returned to normal, but better than normal. The humans had left behind subtle improvements that made everything work more smoothly. The fusion reactor produced more power than ever before. The food tasted better. The air recyclers cleaned the atmosphere so well that breathing felt like drinking cool water on a hot day. But the most important change was in the people themselves. Adults found themselves thinking more clearly, solving problems they had struggled with for years. Children learned faster and dreamed bigger dreams. Everyone felt connected to something vast and wonderful, something that would keep them safe. No matter what darkness might come, Admiral Chun stood on the observation deck of the Prometheus, watching construction crews of living light build protective barriers around distant worlds. Her lieutenant, a tall woman whose skin was covered in flowing patterns of silver and gold, joined her at the window. "Do you think they understand what they have agreed to?" the lieutenant asked. Chun nodded slowly. "They will learn. And when they do, they will become something wonderful. Humanity is not meant to be alone in the universe. We were always meant to be teachers, protectors, gardeners, helping other species grow into their full potential." In the distance, warning sensors detected movement in the deep spaces between galaxies. The real enemy was still coming, still years away, but getting closer every day. But now humanity was no longer alone in preparing for that final battle. They had allies, students, friends who would stand with them when the darkness arrived. The galaxy had accepted humanity's protection. And in doing so, it had taken the first step toward becoming something that could never be destroyed, never be forgotten, never be made to have never existed. The age of sanctuary had begun.